Grow CFO is where finance leaders grow together. Join thousands of like-minded professionals using Grow CFO to access the combined knowledge and experience of the finance leader community. You can join us today at growcfo.net. Hello and welcome to the Grow CFO Show. I'm your host, Kevin Appleby, and today I'm joined with Amy Spurling from Compt. And we're going to talk about retaining talent and sustaining employee engagement. But first of all, hello, Amy. Welcome to the Grow CFO Show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Amy, tell me a little bit about you. What role do you have in Compt at the moment?
I am the founder and CEO here. So we've been around about 5 years. So started the company about 5 years ago, basically because I was a CFO before this a couple of times, 3 times to be exact. And I needed a tool that nobody was building and finally got so frustrated, I decided to start a company to build the tool that I needed.
Yeah. And the fact that you needed the tool yourself said there was a market need for it. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So what exactly does Compt do?
So Compt manages and designs employee perk stipends. So looking at how you manage the piece of employee compensation that has kind of historically landed in employee perks. So this is where I got really frustrated as a CFO. You have to pay market salary. You need to deal with health insurance and different insurance plans across different borders, of course. Some places it's compulsory, some places it's not. But then that's just kind of table stakes. Everybody does that. How you differentiate and get talent in the market is where everybody went to employee perks. And we can thank Silicon Valley for all the plethora of 1,000 things that were hitting companies. Things like pet insurance and dog walking and, snacks and like you name it, there was an app for it, right? But as a company, everything you brought in, everything I was bringing in, maybe 5% of the team would use it. So very low utilization, but super, super expensive. And the CFO and me does not like wasting money. And so I got really frustrated and the team's getting really frustrated because they don't like the things that we're offering. So I was like, look, how do we solve for that? How do we get to everybody being happy, but also being tax compliant and the HR and finance team being able to build something that can work for them as well, to where you don't have this like ever escalating cost structure. And so that's where Compt kind of came from and what we built so that we can get that really high employee engagement, but also those other factors around managing a budget, staying tax compliant and supporting everybody.
Brilliant. I can see why there was a gap in the market. So 5 years on, do you have any competitors, anybody else trying to solve the same problem?
There's a few, but they're solving it in very different ways. So we come at it from a very much a finance perspective. So that's why we built the way we built. So things like, we're US based, so very much IRS tax compliant, so tax authority in the US, but then also managing across borders as well. So we're supporting employees in 60 different countries across our customer base now. So managing that tax compliance is kind of key and core to how we manage things, which sends you down a certain product path. So we focus on reimbursements and having things go through payroll so that they're taxed correctly versus some of our competitors who are doing things, they've got marketplaces where it's like, hey, employees, you've got 20 different wellness companies you can choose from, and so trying to go down the marketplace path or a debit card path, which is the other path that companies could go down. Hey, here's a card you can use to go spend money at different vendors or in different places. There's challenges with all 3 models. We all kind of approach it differently and solve problems for companies in a different way.
Yeah, I suppose over my career, I've seen a mixture of at least 2 of those models. Back when I was working for PwC, we had a number of benefits that you could go for. Some of them were salary sacrifice. Have this benefit instead of some salary. Some of them were you could buy vouchers to shop at a particular store.
Right.
But the vouchers you bought would cost you 90% of the face value.
Right.
And of course, there's the classic UK one, the company provided car.
Right.
Yeah.
Something we don't have in the US.
Yeah.
It's not a common benefit. Yeah, the company provided car is definitely something unique to
it's
UK.
not as common in the UK as it was. And
right.
It's funny now that we're in periods of great inflation, but the company car originated in the UK in the 1970s. government introduced a pay freeze, and a lot of companies got around the senior management pay freeze by giving them a car.
Right. Yep. We typically find that. We're finding that in the US right now. We've got a bunch of pay transparency laws that have been put in place in various states where you have to share, what the salary ranges are for different roles. And what I'm seeing is that companies are being somewhat transparent. There's a very big range. This role is between 50,000 and 300,000 in salary. That's a very, very big range. Even when the ranges are tighter, though, companies are getting around that transparency by increasing benefits for some and not all. And so we're still seeing that benefit kind of creep in some of these places as well, where companies really want to add things and avoid that full transparency. So similar to the company car, I see that happening in the US right now, too.
Yeah. The place that's surprisingly become popular is with electric vehicles in the UK.
That would make sense.
There are some huge tax breaks on electric vehicles at the moment. So a lot of people are saying, well, not sure I want the liability of this car with all these newfangled batteries in myself. I'll happily take one as a company vehicle because that's my personal risk. And that's no breaks for the company as well. So that's an interesting one that we're seeing.
Interesting. That is interesting.
So in terms of retaining talent, is it all about bring these benefits, or is there more to it than that?
It's really around the personalization piece. So it's not, your employee perks should not be your culture. Your employee perks are not the be all end all. If you have, the company car or the pet insurance or the whatever the thing is, it's not going to solve your employee retention issues because it's only going to impact a certain number of people in the company. And so it's much more around, all right, if you have a good culture, you got to have that. If employees don't feel happy, they're going to leave anyways, no matter what you offer them. So you have to have a good company culture. You also need to pay competitively. You can't be way under market on salary, or there's nothing you're going to do on employee perks to retain folks. But if you solve some of that.
Yeah. I've always had the view around paying people competitively that money does not motivate people.
That's correct.
But if you don't pay them properly, it sure does demotivate them.
You should sew that on a pillow. That is absolutely accurate. Like, it's not more money, which, some companies try and manage the employee perks by just putting a little bit more money on people's paychecks. That will never retain employees. And Google actually did a whole study of this, an A/B test on their team. Laszlo Bock did it when he was, years ago, and published about it, where every employee, if you say, hey, do you want employee perks or do you want more cash? Every single employee, myself included, would say, give me more cash. Every single one. But the employees that are retained are not the ones that got a little bit more cash. They're actually the ones that feel like their company is supporting them in a way that is supporting their personal lives. And so even though we all say more cash is what we want, what ultimately keeps us more attached to a company is when we feel like a psychological connection and support from our companies, because you're not talking about 10, 20, $30,000 here. You're talking about relatively small money and what impact it can have in each bucket.
Yeah, things like, oh, I'm getting some subsidized childcare here. I can't leave the company. I'll lose that fantastic benefit.
That's exactly right.
Paying that myself.
Exactly. But just bringing in subsidized childcare as a benefit won't actually be the retention tool. It's allowing employees, where we see that you can have the big impact is saying, hey, we support families. And here's an amount of money you can use. And for people who want to use that to subsidize childcare, great. They can go and use it for that. For people who don't have children or don't have them of that age or whatever the thing is, they can use that to support aging parents, to support, something else within their family. So it allows for that personalization. That's where stipends can be very key to personalization, instead of trying to pick and choose something for each individual person, which is impossible. It's not possible.
So, in sustaining employee engagement, retaining talent's one thing, sustaining engagement. How do you think we should be going about that?
I think it's part of the same kind of multivariable puzzle. So if an employee is engaged, they're going to be retained. If they're not engaged, they're not going to be retained. And so it's figuring out part of that Rubik's Cube of, all right, how do we keep employees to where they feel very supported by the company? and feel very attached to what we're doing, our mission, and are kind of feeling connected to the people they work with. How do we do that? And then that will ultimately retain them. Part of what we do at Compt and what we look at is looking at those employee perks in particular as a measure of engagement. So it doesn't measure like how much I feel connected to my company. Nobody can actually measure that. I mean, you can do surveys and whatever, but their viability is questionable as far as a data set in my mind. What we look at is employee engagement with employee perks, because if you're engaging with what your company is offering you and looking at that, as companies know they have to offer something in this bucket to be competitive, it's all right. If they're not engaging, kind of like what you said before, if they're not using it, it's not going to be a retention tool. And so you have to look at how are employees interacting with their benefits. If they're feeling very connected to them, that's a good thing. If they're not connected to them, they're not a tool and you're wasting your money. So I'd go back to your PwC example. They have tons of benefits. How many of them do you think you used?
Oh, out of a possible maybe 25 that I could have had, maybe 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm. Right. And regularly, or maybe once in a while?
Some of them were, by the nature of what they were offering, were regular things. Yeah.
Well, that's
others
good.
Were once in a while. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's hard to get to that for most companies. And I'll give you an example. So normal employee perks, we talked about it. Everything you bring in, roughly 3 to 5% of the employees are going to take advantage. Subsidized childcare, food, pet insurance, whatever it is. Very small utilization. Because even with a gym membership, what if it's not the gym you go to? What if it's not the one close to your house? What if it's you don't like the gym? Whatever the thing is, right? So if you're looking at 3 to 5% as the normal for each individual thing, that's where marketplaces fall apart, where it's like, okay, how many things do you have to reach the entire team? And we actually went and looked at some data that was pretty fascinating, because our engagement has been 91% for 4 straight years. 91% of people on our platform use their employee perks. Off the charts different from a 5%. So we said, all right, we took 1 year, we pulled 8,700 people and watched them for a year and said, how many different unique vendors will 8,700 people use in 12 months, which gets you to that 91% utilization? Guess how many different vendors they used?
I bet it came down to a relatively small number within the total that were available.
But there's no limit, right? Because we don't have a marketplace. So it's up to the employees of what they can use. So that's the freedom and the personalization piece.
Yeah.
Got any guesses?
100?
27,000.
27,000. Gosh, I was a long way out. So that's 8,500 employees.
So roughly 3 things for each person.
3 things for each person with different vendors.
Yep.
Good grief. That takes some managing.
Right. It's impossible. There's no way a company could build that. And even if we had a list of 27,000 vendors, nobody is scrolling through 27,000 vendors to find the 3 that they want. Never going to happen. Which is where, if you're going to get to personalization, you have to approach it differently. If that's your goal, reach everyone, be something that matters to people, you have to approach this differently and think about it differently. And then if you're getting that engagement, it is a tool for retention. It is a tool for making sure that your team feels supported.
Okay, so give me a practical example of how this works.
Sure.
I'm a brand new employee at one of your major clients. What would the offer look like?
So the company gets to customize what they want employees to be able to focus on. So some companies say, hey, we want to support wellness, or maybe they want to support working from home, and they put in, various things into a bundle. So they're creating something that resonates within their own culture. From there, let's take wellness as an example. A company can say, hey, you've got $100, £100 for this quarter to spend on your wellness. As an employee, you get to say, cool, I've got a wellness stipend. What do I want? Maybe I want running shoes this quarter. Well, okay, last quarter I got running shoes. I don't need running shoes again next quarter. Maybe next quarter it's, you want a fitness tracker. Maybe it's a healthy meal delivery system. Maybe it's going to the gym because now it's winter and you don't want to run outside. It allows you as the employee to use those funds as it matters to you. Still has to relate to wellness, but unlimited vendors. You can go where you want. You can spend in the way that you want to manage your own wellness because you're an adult. You should be able to manage your wellness. Your company shouldn't say, hey, here's how you're going to get fit and well.
Oh, quite. Totally agree.
Right.
But to make that work, Amy, won't the company then have to have a culture and a set of values that go along with those wellness benefits?
Absolutely. I mean, if your company culture is of smoke cigarettes and drink all day, every day in the office, you're probably not going to see a lot of running shoes in the wellness category,
quite.
But they're probably not going to choose a wellness category to begin with. What we
Yeah.
find is that most companies have some sort of a culture where they want to support people's wellness. It's the most commonly used category. And so it's really then empowering employees to be adults, to be able to manage their own wellness. And what we haven't found is that employees are like, I've got $100. Maybe I will buy cigarettes or alcohol instead of using it for wellness. Nobody does that. Nobody wants to do something that they have unlimited personalization. Everybody can do something to make themselves a little bit better, a little bit well. Buy vitamins, do something like get some yoga, do some acupuncture. Like everybody can find something that matters to them. And so you find that employees tend to be more likely to utilize it in a way that the company is probably going to be pretty excited about, and not try and do the fringe, like, hey, I bought a bottle of champagne instead of anything for my actual wellness.
Yeah. So then how does the system work? You've offered, say, $100 in a month to spend on more or less what you like. Do you then take the invoice that you get for that and submit it to the system so it gets reimbursed?
That's exactly right. So you take a picture of the receipt. It can be on your credit card, something that proved that you spent some money, and then you get reimbursed through payroll. Some of those things are taxable, some are not. We manage all of that and have automated all of that. So all that tax compliance is built in, because not every employee perk is taxable, but some are, and a lot are. And so managing that flow so that the company's not having to figure out, hey, should we tax this? Should we not? It all flows through payroll seamlessly to make it easy for employees and employers.
Yeah. So if you've got clients across 60 different countries, that's at least 60 different tax regimes. And thinking about the United States, you've got 50 states, and I know there are subtle differences between every one of those states. That's a lot of rules you've got to comply with. How on earth do you stay abreast with that?
So 2 pieces. One, it's very much a US tax compliant piece of software. So it's compliant with US tax law. When you start crossing borders, what we do is we keep companies conservative. So everything is assumed taxable when you cross a border. But if a company tells us, hey, in this country, tax this thing, don't tax that. In this other country, do this other thing, we have the ability to adjust that. But we are not global tax experts. Honestly, there isn't a single accounting firm in the world that is a global tax expert. So we certainly, like, our software would be astronomically expensive if we had to do that. We work with the customers that have employees in those countries. They have already vetted this, for their team, because they're already doing these. It's just a different delivery mechanism, and we can manage it that way so that they stay on the conservative side of things.
Yeah, but I'm guessing that, say, you've got a client who have employees in the UK. Your system, therefore, will have to build in all of the taxes on salaries rules for the UK.
Well, the taxes on salaries rules are already being built into the payroll system.
Yes.
So because it all feeds through payroll, that's how we make sure that we're not managing payroll. We're not a payroll company.
So payroll is not included in Compt. Compt is
correct
to the payroll.
That's correct. Right. So we work with all the major payroll providers. And so making sure that compliance is built in.
Got you. Yeah. So, Amy, I suppose the question that I've got, and we talked about pay is definitely not a motivator. If you can set up a benefit system that is very much personalized, very much aligned to a company culture, I can see that will motivate. But isn't a large amount of motivation a bit broader than that? Isn't it about developing people? Isn't it about stretching people to their potential?
Absolutely. Yeah. This is not a substitute for that. Absolutely agree with that. If employees don't feel that they are supported from a personal development, career development perspective, if they feel like they're in a dead-end job, if they feel like their company culture is not great, if they feel like the company isn't going the right direction, there is nothing you're going to put in as an employee perk solution that is going to salvage that. Absolutely. We're just not solving that problem. We're solving a different piece of the puzzle for companies. But I would say you need to get that stuff on track for sure. Where we do see companies work with our platform on that personal and professional development is running their professional development through our platform. So a lot of companies have these professional development money that they've allocated for team members. The challenge is that it's kind of sitting out there. Nobody really knows what they have. It's usually not very managed. And so it's, we've got this, but employees don't know how to be able to take advantage of it. So with this, it gives employees their budget to be able to use towards professional development and gives them the ability to then work with their manager to say, all right, I've got $1,000 this year. Are you going to use it for books to up level on a certain skill? Are you going to take a seminar? Are you going to take an online class? So it gives that ability for the employee to work with their manager to actually know what their budget is and use that. And so we see much higher utilization of those budgets by employees than you do if you just kind of have it out there of like, hey, we support professional development.
That sounds like a really interesting way of handling that. And I'm guessing because that's coming out the learning development budget.
Correct.
Most of that won't be taxable on the individual.
That's correct. That is one of those non-taxable categories pretty much everywhere. And we see it gets really interesting because a lot of companies for a long time defaulted, at least in the US, to tuition reimbursement. That was their professional development. Hey, if you're approved, you get a big chunk of money to go get your next degree. Well, what you find is that one, it is a big chunk of money, but very, very few people are approved for it. And a lot of people don't need another degree. And so what companies are finding is even more meaningful, smaller budgets, can be much smaller, can be a couple $100s a year, but then it's more accessible to everyone. Then it's not, do I need to go take another college class? It's much more of, hey, I want to read this book about, this new management technique because I want to kind of move myself along the path of being a better manager. Or I want to take this online class, which a lot of times those are a lot cheaper, more seminar based, or, it just makes it a lot more accessible to where people are making steps in their career without having to be like, oh my gosh, when am I going to find time to go get my graduate degree? Like it just changes the game and makes professional development much more accessible across an entire team.
Yeah. And we're doing something similar in Grow CFO. We're partnering with another very interesting startup like yourselves. It's a company called Learnerbly. Now, Learnerbly allow companies to buy vouchers effectively for training, and then Learnerbly go out and fill their catalog with what they consider the best of the market from all over the place. So you'll be able to go into the Learnerbly platform. If you're in the category of finance, you'll see Grow CFO's team training courses, finance team training courses, and they're normally part of Grow CFO premium membership, but we price them also at £100 sterling, because Learnerbly is a UK company.
Right.
Now, you will have your Learnerbly allowance. So you go into Learnerbly, yes, you say you want to do this one. Learnerbly will suddenly give you a code. You then use that code in our purchasing system, and it takes the price down from 100 to 0.
Yep, which is super cool. Fantastic. It's creating like a marketplace of all the different learning options.
What it's doing is giving the individual employee all the choice that they want.
Right.
And I've had that view for a long time. The person that knows their learning and development requirement better than anybody else is the person themselves.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Like we need to start, I think we're seeing a shift in the dynamic, and it's been happening for a bit now. The employer-employee relationship. For a long time, it's been very almost parental, company, parent, employee, child, which just doesn't make sense, right? You and I are both grown-ups. We are both adults. We both know how to manage our own careers and our wellness and all of the things in our lives. We don't need a company telling us this is the way you need to manage your career, the next class that you have to take to, advance your perspective on something, or what you need for wellness. It's more about a company supporting and making it a much more collaborative relationship where there's something, companies need employees, employees need companies. Let's make that a much more collaborative relationship where companies can support employees in what they want to do for their personal lives. You're going to get so much more from your employees in that scenario, and just a very different, it changes that dynamic in a really positive way is what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm thinking of that sort of annual development conversation that many would have. And the way I'd want to start that is by saying, okay, Amy, if we were sitting down and having this conversation in 3 years' time, what had to happen to you personally and professionally for you to feel happy?
That's exactly right. Yep. And then working out a plan.
Yeah.
And letting the employee drive that. It's not on the manager to decide what my career path is. That's too much responsibility for a manager. And again, creates that parent-child relationship.
Yeah. But I'd still possibly, as the manager, want to make some observations and say,
of course,
hey, have you thought about, or you're playing down your talents there. Don't you realize you're really good at whatever?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where it's collaborative though, right? Because you've got an external partner who is working with you, helping mentor you, helping guide you, but you still get to decide what you ultimately want in your career. Somebody may be great at something, but they may not want to do it at all. As an example, I had a woman on our team who was phenomenal marketer, like absolutely fantastic, amazing writer, so talented at what she did. And she came to me one day, she had two 2-year-old girls at the time, and was like, look, one, I don't want to work full time. I need to go to freelance, and I just want to write. And also, I don't really want to write about HR tech anymore. I've been doing that for 10 years and I'm kind of over it. I want to go write about something else. So even though she was amazing at this, I get it too. Like, she wanted to go and experience something different. And of course, we worked it out with her, and she's been like, kind of worked her transition so that she could go find her next thing. But it's one of those things where it's like, she was phenomenal at it, but she didn't want to do it, because just because you're good at something doesn't mean that's got to be your life objective. Yeah.
But I do think an awful lot of retaining talent is about being able to have those conversations.
I agree.
It's like, hey, I want to work part-time.
Right.
Well, yeah, okay, fine. Let's explore that a bit. Let's see how it works out. How could we make that work?
That's exactly right.
I think very definitely employee driven. And I firmly believe that's the way things should be in learning development environment.
Yes, I completely agree with that. I think having a one size fits all doesn't make sense. You and I are at a very different stage of our careers than somebody who is just coming out of university. You know, you and I both likely still want to learn things and do new things and try new things, but we're at a different stage and we need different things than somebody who is, 22 years old and just starting out and learning a lot of things for the first time. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't both have access to learning and development. We just need something very different. It needs to be personalized to where we are in our stage of our career and what our personal goals are.
Very definitely. Very, very definitely. And I also think that having that conversation with a member of staff that says, you're not very good at this, I think you should get some training around that.
Absolutely.
Is a very wrong conversation to have. I take a view that says, if you've got an aptitude for doing something, you can develop that aptitude. You can learn skills around that aptitude. You can go from being good to being fantastic.
Right.
If you're no good at something, the best you'll do through a few training courses and personal development is turn yourself from bad to mediocre.
That's exactly right. It's never going to be your star quality, right? But it may be something that is mission critical for you to not lose your job. So you may need to go from awful to mediocre just to keep your job. And so there could be things that could be helpful training in that. So I'm thinking about things like time management, prioritization. So kind of some of those core skills that are not, whether or not you have an aptitude for numbers versus you're a creative artist. Probably not going to teach that if somebody has no aptitude for it, but there's some of those other skills or soft skills that could be taught that could help somebody become a better manager or, a more productive employee.
Making that stuff available, I think, is very important. And I'm very aware at the moment that the finance function is moving at a pace. adopting new technology, adopting new systems, new ways of working. And as a result, we could focus all our training budget on training people in those new systems, those new ways of working, and actually forget about the other stuff, the soft skills, the things that actually take people on to the next level. So I think in any retention situation, think about what is it that's going to really benefit your people and show them you're interested in them as individuals, rather than just getting this finance transformation across the line.
Yep, that's exactly right. You can train people on new systems that will benefit your company, but if that somebody wants to go to a different company that isn't using that system, might be a useful skill, might not. Versus if you train your managers to be better managers, one, you're more likely to retain the people they're working with because it's a better manager situation, but also is just helping that person's career as well. So I think it can't just be the hard skills. It also needs to be the soft skills and giving some opportunity for that as well.
So we've talked about retaining talent. We've talked about keeping employee engagement up, but the final words, on a budget. Okay.
Yep.
Why is all of this on a budget?
Well, I mean, have you read the news? There's a lot of stuff going on globally. A lot of companies are trying to figure out, does this, at least in the US, does this look and feel like 2008? Does this look like a recession? What does that mean? How do we protect against what happened? Because nobody wants to go through that again. And so companies are really like finances front and center in a way that they have been,
it's the same here in the UK.
Yep. And so we're seeing where companies are trying to figure out, all right, if we have to preserve our capital because we need to make sure that we don't know what the storm is, but we can feel that one's coming, how do you do that? And one of the big differences between this and 2008 is that there's relatively low unemployment. In 2008, you had much higher unemployment. You knew if you needed to get people, you could get people. So there was a lot of cutting. As a CFO then, we laid off a lot of people. We reduced benefits. We reduced compensation. We did all kinds of things that absolutely will not fly right now, because you cannot afford to cut when you also cannot hire when you need to. It is very difficult to hire in this market. And so you've got to walk that balance and then figure out, all right, how do I get the most bang for my buck? How do I do things in the most efficient way possible? Is it tool consolidation? Don't pay for 3 tools, pay for 1 that is cheaper than the 3 together. Is it focusing on your business model to where you can find a way to do, with fewer people, the same amount of business, to where you don't have to have as many heads to be able to manage it. So getting rid of some of that manual process, that requires a lot of employee overhead. But you have to figure out, all right, how can we creatively cut and not adversely impact the overall company? And cutting salary and benefits it's not on the table, quite frankly.
No. Also, cutting heads is a difficult thing to do. My experience of cutting heads is you lose the wrong people. The people you want to retain are generally the ones that are going to find it easiest to get another job. And therefore, if you offer them a package to leave, they'll be the first ones out the door.
Right.
So I'm just wondering, Amy, how do you think you approach that particular conundrum at the moment, if you want to reduce the number of people you've got and hang on to the right ones?
I think it depends on the size and stage of company. Where I've seen it work and not impact the overall kind of losing the people that you want to keep is when there's a division, a department, a group that you let go because it's not performing, or it's a business model that just doesn't work. Because that's, it's a little bit insulated from the rest of the business. Trying to do 10% cut across the entire team is likely going to go exactly where you're going with this. Like, you're going to lose some good talent, because in theory, you're already working out of the company the people that don't perform. That should be happening regardless of what the market is. If it's a good market or a bad market, you should always be doing that. So if you've been doing that, then you're basically looking at a bunch of really good people that now you've got to figure out, all right, how do we do less with more? Like, is it, again, I look at tool consolidation, I look at business model first versus headcount, because you've got to figure out, all right, if I cut this amazing person and load up my really awesome person, and now they've got 3 jobs, they're going to leave. In this market, they can absolutely go and do something else.
Give them more work to do. They're not going to be quite as awesome anymore because they
Right.
won't put in
Right.
the right amount of effort into the things that they're awesome at.
Right. That's exactly right. They're just not going to have the time to do that.
Yeah.
And so if you were appropriately staffed, just cutting's not going to work. If you had bloated staff, if you were hiring way ahead of the curve and you had a bunch of salespeople or marketers or engineers or whatever the group is that, you assumed your business was going to 4x this year, so you hired way ahead, that's a different conversation. You've got bloat that you can kind of right size to where the business is today. But if you've been running in a measured way, cutting's probably not going to be the answer.
Yeah. So I can certainly see that what you're doing with Compt in the way that you're allocating controlled sums of money that everybody is effectively going to use is a great way of doing the benefits piece. If you're doing deals with individual companies, putting a big catalog together, you're going to spend a lot of money on doing that, which isn't necessarily going to go through to the individual.
That's exactly right.
I can see exactly where this model fits. Yeah. So, Amy, just tell us, just in closing, a little bit about your previous career. What got you to the point that you're now CEO and founder of an organization? How did you get there?
Sure. So I spent about, I'm 24 years into tech. I've been in the tech space and a lot of different types of tech companies for a long time. I was a CFO 3 times. I was a COO twice. 5 of my 6 prior companies went through exits. I took 2 of them through that process, like pretty standard CFO, COO stuff as you're figuring out how to build, grow, scale companies. All of my companies had, finance and HR rolling up into me. And so in managing that, I could see that frustration. Like, things were different in, 2003 than they were in 2010. Employee needs and wants were different. Technology was entirely different. The need for personalization became greater and greater as we have all these apps that are personalized to us, right? So it was really around looking at, almost all of my teams have been global. And so they've had employees all over the world, trying to figure out, all right, how do I fairly compensate people? We're in different countries with different compulsory benefits, and you're looking at parental leave and you're looking at health insurance and looking at all these things, but wanting to feel like you have one team, one culture, one company culture, even within different country cultures, and trying to solve for that. And I just got really frustrated with the lack of tools to be able to do it. And I understood why my employees were frustrated, because all I did was ever tell them, no, I want this thing. No, I want this other thing. No, because you're going to be the only one who wants it. And then, why am I putting something in place that makes one person happy when I need to make 1,000 people happy? And so trying to figure out how to navigate that personalization piece is really what drove this for me, and wanting to build a tool, because I waited about 3 years. I was like, this problem is driving me bananas. Somebody build the tool. And I pitched it to different engineers. I was like, please just go build this for me. I just need this thing to exist. And nobody built it, because you have to understand finance and HR to build this. And
Yes.
so finally decided, I turned 40. I said, to heck with it. What am I waiting for? And I decided to go and build it.
Would you ever go back from being CEO in your own company to being a CFO working for somebody else?
I don't know. I mean, I like the finance role. I mean, that's part of what I still absolutely think like a CFO, but I love being in my own company. I don't know if I'll have another company, quite frankly. I'm hoping this does well enough I don't have another company after this, that we just do fabulously well, just grow it and, do this forever until an exit. And then, I go hiking, do something.
Brilliant. I love that. Love that. Yeah. Or don't have the exit and pay somebody else to do it for you while you go hiking.
Exactly. Always. Well, we're venture backed, so I don't know how much our investors want to not have an exit at some point. You either have to IPO or exit if you're venture backed. So it'll probably be one of those.
Yeah.
But there's no timeline, which is the beauty of it. It's figuring out, like, build the right thing for the market, make sure you're having an impact on people's lives. That's what we focus on, is really having that positive impact.
Amy, that is brilliant. Thoroughly enjoyed finding out all about this today. Thank you for being this week's guest on the Grow CFO Show.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.